Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Full-Time Whittle Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Begbies trainer, administrator Gerald Krasner, who, first and foremost, Gerald, I'd like to say thank you for reaching out to do this interview. I understand that there's a lot of non-disclosure agreements in place, so there will be things you can't talk about, but I want to ask the questions that are on the fans' lips. So I think this interview hopefully will be quite insightful for anyone watching. So first and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I'd like to make it plain. We've not discussed any of the questions. I'm going in blind, which is the way I like to. So I'm fairly relaxed today. We've got a buyer.
Which is music to everyone's ears. Absolutely, we have got a buyer. So Gerald, it makes sense to start this podcast where it all began. So please can you talk us through the first couple of days when you was appointed as the administrator?
Yeah, sure. I got a phone call on the 25th of June from my partner, Paul Stanley, saying he'd been approached by a firm of lawyers to give advice about an unnamed football club at that time and various options in given scenarios. Together, we put together a letter that day, sent it to them, and the next day, the 26th of June, there was a telephone call between the three of us, at which by then we knew it was Wigan, and we discussed various things, various options, what they meant, what the technical issues were, and they said they'd get back to us. They had to go back to their client to discuss it with him. In the meantime, we'd sent them an email for further information, which we actually never got. And then they came back about the 30th or 29th, I can't remember the exact day, and said, would you be prepared to be administrator of the football club? Because we have to consent. We had done our searches before then and noticed that all the properties were in different companies. There were 5 companies under the control of the owner. And we said we wouldn't take the football club as its own, on its own, because we had to control everything if we were going to do a sale. And they agreed, all 5 companies. They prepared the paperwork for the High Court. We were appointed 1st of July at 10 o'clock, and at 10:30 we turned up at the football club.
It's a really dramatic turn of events in terms of you didn't really, like you say, you kind of go in blind into the situation. What did you know when you first came into the club in terms of what was your first strategies on how you're going to potentially sell it?
Can I say on previous insolvencies, or when I bought Leeds United, we had a week or so to gather information so we could go in knowledgeable. We turned up at the football club. We didn't even know which bank was involved because we were told we could not contact anybody till we were appointed. So we turned up and the UK directors were there, Darren Royal and John Jackson, and they were, to be honest, completely shell-shocked. They'd been expecting £6 million to arrive, and instead they got us. So it took a while to convince them that there was, once an administration order is made, we have to act in a certain way. We can't ignore it. We spent a couple of hours doing the fastest fact-finding we've ever done on a job, find out what the situation was. That first day we did a press conference, we spoke to the council, we spoke with the supporters club, and I believe we spoke with Lisa Nandy.
What was those conversations like?
Everybody was shocked, and we explained what our job was. We had, after we found out what the situation was, we had our own private meeting, and we devised the initial strategy going forward on day 1, which I announced at press conference, which was number 1, we had to finish the season, because if we don't, you're out the Football League, no 2 ways. And number 2, we wanted to sell the club successfully. And number 3, as a result of what was going on that day when it was announced, it was apparent that we had to look very quickly into the events leading up to the administration and find out what had gone on and why it had gone on and what we could do to rectify the situation. So day 1 was a very, very long day. And at the end of it, we had a strategy, an initial strategy, And we kept talking. I mean, from the 1st of July to the middle of September, the three of us were working 7 days a week on this job. Saturdays and Sundays were weekdays as far as we were concerned. Every day we'd have a conversation. Where are we going? What are we doing? It was obvious to me, we split the duties. What happens is you have three administrators. Really, I think we should have had four for this job. It was such a difficult job, but we had three. I was responsible for the PR and also selling the club. Paul was going to deal with all the players and their problems, and Dean was the workhorse, if you like, who was going to do all the facts, figures, and make sure the job worked day to day. And we were playing to each other's strengths, which is what you do. It was obvious to me that to get this club sold, we had to sort out a £25 million loan in the football club due to the owners, because without that, any buyer would have to pay at least £6.25 million as a dividend to avoid a 15-point penalty. You'll recall on the 1st of July, there were still strong hopes that we would remain a championship club, even with a 12-point deduction.
The 12-point deduction is obviously mandatory with the Football League and the administration. Obviously, we did appeal the Football League's 12-point deduction, and it's understood that Wigan had to appeal under force majeure, which is unforeseen circumstances. What specifically were the circumstances that we appealed on?
The fact that the owner could not put the money in because of the effect of COVID. Act of God, we call it, unless you're an atheist, in which case it's force majeure. We had 7 days. On the 2nd of July, we got the letter from the Football League with the standard wording about the 12 points and other matters. We immediately appealed, and we had 7 days to do 3 months' work in, effectively. We managed to get all the paperwork done and submitted just in time. And as we know, there was a hearing, and for the record, it was a very fair hearing. It was not run by the Football League, the hearing. They were independent QCs. It lasted all day Friday. I was sat there. I gave evidence, as did Paul Stanley. And I won't say we were optimistic, but we felt we had a 50-50 chance. And as it turned out, we didn't.
You say you had a 50-50 chance. With obviously the finances at stake, how much of a difference would it have made if Wigan were a championship club and won the appeal in terms of finding a buyer?
Well, in the first round of selling the club, which we did on day one, before the appeal was heard, we had an offer north of £10 million on the basis it remained a championship club. Had it stayed in the championship, I believe, for good reasons I can't tell you, but for very good reasons, that offer would have gone forward. They were planning to inject money into Wigan, but as soon as it was known we were relegated, the offer was withdrawn.
With that £10 million deal which was in the pipeline, would that have covered the previous creditors and the loans that our Yeung had not previously wrote off at that point in time?
No. But what it would have done, it would have allowed us, with the Yeung deal that we did, and I'll come on to that later, by selling only a few players, we'd have done a quick deal. We would not have had to pay wages July, August and September. I don't know if you recall, I originally wanted to do a deal by 31st of July. We would have sold fewer players and we'd have been out quicker.
And I think that is... it was a massive difference in terms of what division you're in, because obviously you got the TV revenue. There's a substantial difference between League One and Championship. Moving back onto the appeal, did they reject it altogether in terms of force majeure?
It doesn't work that way. You either win or lose. There's no score draw.
There's no... Was there parts where they thought, well, that is feasible, but other areas which were...
No, they do. They give their verdict and then they give their reasons for it. And on balance, I understand their reasons, but I'm still at a loss to understand what could be a force majeure bigger than this epidemic we're living through. But that's my personal view. And even these wise people who made the decision got some of it slightly wrong on facts, because you'll recall afterwards, I got some social media that sort of said Mr. Yeung took advice before he even bought the club about administration, which is not correct, because he bought it on the 4th of June and we never heard from him till the 25th of June. So they misread some facts, but it wouldn't have altered the decision.
With that meeting, what did you advise the next leader fund on in terms of the administration? Was you against it? Did you recommend maybe selling some of the younger players in the training ground instead of the sort of administration?
I can't go into that. That's a personal matter. It's covered by confidentiality. There were 4 alternatives we gave them. Administration was not the worst.
Can you disclose any of the 4 alternatives? Are you not allowed to comment?
One of them was liquidation.
One of them was liquidation, which is obviously the worst case scenario.
As a last resort and should not really seriously be considered.
Thank you. EFL chairman did an interview at the start of July, and he said COVID wasn't a feasible excuse for the administration. Was this comment considered before you decided to do an appeal against the 12-point deduction?
Now, we took a view on doing the appeal was twofold. Number one or two of the buyers wanted a championship club. Now, without any appeal, you couldn't stay in the championship. And it's unfortunate we didn't beat Fulham at the last match of the season, because I think we'd have stayed up if we had, but we didn't. So that was one reason. Number two, we felt that it was for the benefit of pulling Wigan together, to understand that it was Wigan. I know what it's like to follow a team that's against the rest of the world, having been a Leeds supporter all my life. But I felt that that was useful to bind in the various parts of Wigan, supporters, club, the staff, to see that we weren't just going to lie down, but we were going to take on the law, because nobody had ever won it, nobody had ever gone down this route, there'd never been a pandemic before. So rightly or wrongly, we took that decision.
I fully understand this, and I do agree with the theory that almost everything's impossible until it's made possible. It's never been appealed against before, but from a point of view, the appeal at a time of real financial struggle, would you say it kind of weren't necessary? I don't want to say it was a waste of money, but do you think it could have been spent a little bit better?
What would you have said to me if I told you we had an offer in excess of £10 million, in excess, not at 10, for being a championship club, and I said, well, no, we're not going to appeal? What would you have said?
I think it is a worthwhile gamble, which I do appreciate that, and that's probably the reason why we went for the appeal. But in terms of the actual final cost of the appeal, including the lawyers and the other fees, how much did it come to, if you're allowed to disclose?
About 300,000. I thought it'd be more, but it was about 300,000 plus VAT, and we get the VAT back.
So do you stand by that decision to appeal, even though, like you said, there's only
the circumstances at the time, 100%.
No problem at all. And with the club's appeal against the deduction, it was revealed in the report that our Yeung gave information at the said appeal. Are you able to disclose what information he provided?
No.
Is that for legal reasons?
That's because we have certain signed agreements with various parties as to what we can and can't disclose. And for the record, the 3 of us are what's known as officers of the court. That means we are answerable to the High Court for every action we do. And if we break the rules, we're going to get more than our knuckles wrapped. So I am careful to stay within them.
Okay, that's understandable, because I understand that it is legally binding, and obviously officers of court, you answer to the court. In terms of the previous owner,
if I can add, we've got agreements of a similar nature with Mr. Yeung and his advisors, and if we break that, his right to claim the 6 million may be put back.
Is this something that was agreed when you had the conversations about the appeal and obviously the general administration?
Was what agreed? Sorry.
was the non-disclosure agreement almost?
I said at the press conference I'd write to Mr. Yeung and ask for a meeting in July by Zoom. And everybody was very sceptical that he'd agree or turn up, because at that stage, people were saying, does this guy even exist? He did agree to turn up and cooperate. He was very frank in what he said. It was obvious from what he said. He came over as truthful. He had a translator, but for part of it, he spoke himself, and he sounded as though what we were hearing was reasonable in the circumstances. This gambling story was a load of rubbish as far as I was concerned, and had just sidetracked everything. I made a few comments, and I then said, I would like to come to some sort of an agreement with you, Mr. Yeung, for the benefit of the club. And if he was of a view that if he could do something to benefit the club in view of the circumstances, he would do it. And then legal agreements were drawn up over the next week and signed off. And that's as far as I can go.
Have you spoken to Al Yeung since the Zoom call in July?
I've spoken to his lawyers.
You've spoken to his lawyers. In terms of your own opinion, do you have any clear idea of why he would spend over 40 million only to put the club into administration?
I didn't think he was spending it and thinking of administration at the same time. I think the general view was that we in the UK are not the only ones to be hit by COVID. And it started in China, if you recall, and businesses out there have been very badly affected, and he couldn't save all his businesses, and England was a long way away.
Okay. You've said in previous interviews before that there will be an investigation into the previous owners. Can you give an update on the processes and what you found?
No.
Is that again legal agreement?
We've sent reports to the insolvency service. It's now in their court to look at what we've told them, whether they want more information, and we are not allowed to discuss it with anybody under pain of severe penalty.
Would it ever be available to the public in the future?
No.
No, it's strictly confidential.
Yes. The only thing that is open to the public is if the insolvency service decide on what we've told them to take action. That may be in the public domain, but other than that, everything else is confidential.
Without revealing information about that, then, are you allowed to maybe disclose of what the investigation involved?
No.
No details at all?
I'm not prepared to discuss intricate parts of our investigation. We are satisfied that he actually did pay the 42 million. That I can say. But as to the exact questions and areas, I'm not prepared to discuss that.
That's understandable, and I do appreciate that there is obviously agreements and legalities behind not being able to speak about it. But I think it's quite important that we ask these questions, because it had a significant effect on the town of Wigan, as you know. And on the 20th of August 2020, Al Yeung ceded his right of repayment of the 25.3 million debt that was owed to him. Why do you think he agreed to waive the loan?
Because I asked him to.
Was there another reason as to why?
No, just explained. I'm a very persuasive person at times. That's part of my job.
So was he quite comfortable in obviously waving away such a large amount of money?
Comfortable is the word. He was prepared to do it after discussing it with his advisors.
How much of a turning point was this loan being waived away in terms of finding a buyer?
In terms of doing it in 4 weeks, absolutely necessary. Although we had interest, as soon as we mentioned this loan, because we had to give out information packs, everybody was asking, well, what's happening with this loan? And if we didn't have an answer, the buying process would have just stopped.
Do you believe that Wigan could have gone into liquidation if this wasn't waved away?
I think Wigan could have gone into liquidation at a number of points in the last 3 months.
Are you able to pinpoint some of these points?
if we hadn't done what we'd done, then, and it hadn't been what I would term reasonably successful, then Wigan would not be in administration today, they'd be in liquidation.
That's
what you have to understand is that the process of administration is very technical. It's for certain purposes. 3 purposes are set out in the Insolvency Act. If at any time you can't meet the purpose you're doing, you have an obligation to go back to court to terminate the administration order.
in terms of people who aren't as clued up or as aware as administration, do you mind giving a little bit of a run through of your obviously job role and obviously your entitlements, who you serve to, who you answer to? Because I know I've seen a lot of rumours on social media over the last few months, which I know aren't correct, but you obviously claims that you obviously you're working for the previous owners when that's not true. You're officers of the court.
Right. Number 1, to go into administration, you have to be insolvent. Wigan was certainly insolvent. When we went in, the June wages had not been paid. Number 2, you have to declare the purpose of the administration. Now, there's 3 purposes. You can pick 1 or you can pick 2. The first purpose is to effectively do surgery on the business and then hand it back. That is not possible in the case of Wigan. The second purpose is to realise a better return for the creditors, both preferential and ordinary creditors. That is the purpose under which we were appointed. And the third purpose is a better return for the secured creditors. There are no secured creditors. So our purpose in the High Court was to do the best for the creditors of the company. Now, the creditors of the company are Mr. Yeung's company at 25 million, and then about 5.2 million of other creditors, of which the revenue are more than half. Unfortunately, the fans are not creditors of the company, although 1 or 2 of them may be for small amounts that they are due refunds for matches not being played. But in terms of the totality of creditors of 5.2 million, they are not significant, I'm afraid. And that's where a lot of this confusion has arisen. And this is where even the politicians, which I'm going to mention later, hopefully, do not understand the law and wanted me to break the law effectively.
How you broke the law effectively?
Well, can we deal with that when we get on to what the politicians have said?
Yeah, we can move on to that. And to also move on, you mentioned a bit of confusion from the fan side. And an area of confusion and an area where you've received criticism is on player sales. At the start of the process, Paul Stanley said in an interview with the Wigan Post on the 15th of July that there will be no fire sale on the same day that you said there'll be significant player sales. The fans obviously received very mixed messages from that. Was this a bit of mix up in communications between yourselves? And do you want to provide a bit of clarification?
By me, a fire sale is when you sell a pound note for 50p. We aim to sell pound notes for at least £1. Now, I could see how if you don't know what administration is, you don't understand what's going on. And my sympathies with all those fans who have felt frustrated at what was being done and said. But on day 1, we walked in, we found out there was about £250,000 in the bank that could be released because the bank had a claim under the refunds. There was wages of over £1 million due. June had not been paid. Now, under the football regulations, if after 28 days the wages are not fully paid, the players have the right to walk on free contracts, which means you can't do anything. At that stage, you'd have had to liquidate the club. So our priority was to get the money in and pay the June wages so that at least we had some breathing space. We couldn't sell players to the EFL at that stage because it was closed season. The transfer window wasn't open. There was 6.4 million of football creditors. So if we had sold players, the EFL would have held the money, which wouldn't have paid the wages. So we sold 2 junior players, I think, to Brighton, which gave us enough money to pay the net wages for June and give us another month's breathing space. Now, in administration, a month is a long time of breathing space. We then looked at what our needs would be going forward. And at the same time, we were trying to sell the club. It was all being done side by side. And we reckoned that the wage bill was 12.2 million just for the players, forget the backroom staff. The League One cap is 2.5 million. That's a difference of 10 million. And I think I watched your interview with Mr. Nixon, which I must say was very fair. Even he admitted that the wage bill was ridiculously high. And the only way to get a wage bill down is to sell players. Now you can argue, did we get the right price for players? We brought an agent on side, an independent agent to advise us. We turned down twice as many offers as we accepted. But because clubs had very limited income, the appetite for buying players, even after the end of the season, was limited, especially the players from Wigan. Forget the international players in the Premiership. So we were getting bids which were looking reasonable or were being turned down, but they weren't in the area of what the fans thought they should be. So we then took a view, well, if we can't get the money today, let's get what's known as add-ons. And when I've talked to the fans, they don't understand what add-ons are, some of them. So if I can have a minute to explain, you can do a deal when you sell a player, you get X pounds, and then you get add-ons for their first 10 appearances, their next 10 appearances, a percentage of their sell-on fees. Now, I brought with me the add-ons for the players we've sold, and it's now £10 million. So what that means is you will never get £10 million, but you'll get maybe 2 million of it over the next 2 or 3 years. That is for the benefit of the new owner. And we have told all the bidders this. All we need out of that add-on is 250,000, which have all agreed was reasonable. And they get the rest of the add-ons for £1. So although you may think some of the players were worth millions, well, in this market, I'm afraid they're not. The add-ons more than compensated for the fact of the pandemic. We got more on add-ons than we would have normally because of the shortage of money on day one.
Would you stand by that you got the best possible value deal for some of the players? Because I know the fans have been, like you said, a bit confused with some of the fees, because obviously I understand that a fan's valuation of a player is different to a market valuation. We've seen spending has been down because of the pandemic in the divisions. And obviously it's an interesting take. You mentioned the selling clauses. We could get, there's 10 million there, but we could get to up to 2. I imagine it's appearance based, achievement based, promotion based kind of add-ons in a usual football deal. But would you, to go back to my question, do you believe you got the best possible value deal for each player you sold?
In the circumstances, and the first million that we got in for the 2 youngsters, we originally turned down an offer of 400 grand for both of them. So the fans shouldn't believe we just took any offer. We didn't.
That's understandable. That's understandable. That's understandable that you didn't accept any offer.
I think we achieved what we want, but more importantly, once we were relegated, there were 2 types of bidders. There were bidders that wanted us to do the dirty work and get rid of the players and get a League One side ready for them to take over. And then there were people who were going to bid and telling us we can't sell anybody. Well, how were we supposed to pay the wages for August, September if we're not allowed to sell players?
That's a very interesting point. And as you mentioned previously,
some of them had their own motive. They wanted to come into the club, not pay a lot for it. They'll sell the players and get their money back so that everything stands them at nothing.
That's a very interesting point. And to stay on the player sales, in the past, you've mentioned in press conferences the sales value of players in terms of the exact figures. I know on the 27th of August, Paul Stanley ran through the list of players who've departed and the fees. We have not yet revealed the values of Captain Sam Morsey and Nathan Byrne, who were two of arguably our better players. Are you able to disclose how much they went for at this moment in time?
No.
Is it legal, undisclosed?
It's a matter of, at this moment in time, we're not disclosing individual amounts. In the fullness of time, we might, or you might be able to check up through the Football League, I don't know. But today, I am not revealing individual player sales. Because I can tell you one thing, if you ask 10 fans for 10 valuations, they'll all be different.
I think it's an interesting point because fans see market values of a player differently. I might think a player is really good. Another fan might think they're not so great. So that is an interesting point you raise.
Well, how do you value it? Pick a player and tell me how you value it.
I personally think that the sale that raised a lot of eyebrows was Joe Gelhardt. He, in my opinion, could have gone on to great things for England. £900,000, I believe it's quoted, plus add-ons. And I believe that even in the market we're facing, it is quite low considering the quality of player and the potential of the player, because in a few years' time, I believe, like a lot of fans, he's destined to have a great career at the top level.
How much would you value in that?
I'd value Joe Gelhardt around 5 million. I think that's quite reasonable.
In the close season?
In the close season, but when you consider that Jude Bellingham went from Birmingham City to Borussia Dortmund for a figure over 20,000.
First of all, Leeds were the only people that were even interested in him. And secondly, we've got over £1 million worth of add-ons on him.
Okay, that
Leeds will pay 5 million for him. I would be flabbergasted. That market does not exist.
I think you are correct. And I think the second you go into administration as well, why would a team pay £100 for a player, for example, when they're available for a lot less? Because obviously you're in a vulnerable position when you have to pay the wages.
Where we got the best prices pro rata were where there were more than one team interested.
Yeah,
competition. When you're the only buyer in town, it's a different matter.
In one of your previous answers, sorry, were you making a point?
Yeah, and I think it's fair. I think it is fair comment that when you're buying off a club in administration, you think they're desperate for the money, so you bid low, which is what everybody was doing, and we were just turning them all down. And then they came back with the sort of figures where we thought we could do a deal, and if they didn't meet what we wanted, we wouldn't take it. But there was no way we were going to get over £1 million for Gelhardt from anybody. Okay,
that's a reasonable answer. And in one of your earlier answers, you alluded to the fact that you'll receive £250,000 in terms of the add-ons. Can you explain this a bit further, how it works?
Yeah, I won't give you the exact figures, but if I tell you, for every 10 appearances, up to 170 appearances, we get a fixed six-figure sum off Leeds. And we get a percentage of any profit on sell-ons. So if he's sold for 4 million and they paid 800 and they've not paid any of the add-ons, we get a percentage of the 3.2 million profit, which goes to the new owners.
Is this a situation with every player you've sold?
Different. Every player is different. Every club is different. There's no standard. The percentages are different. The amounts are different. It's like buying a house. You negotiate independently on each house.
Are you allowed to disclose the range of percentages?
No.
Is that legal, or is this something you don't wish to share?
I'm going to disclose it.
Is it because of legal reasons?
No, I'm not going into details because all it will do will stir up. You could have got 15% instead of 10%. So what I'm telling you is we've gone by what the market will stand based on professional advice.
Okay, so we're going to move on now from the players to another area, which was widely criticised by politicians and the fans, and that was the sale of Euxton training ground. First and foremost, if we get a bit of context, can you explain what the situation is with the training ground? It was originally part of the package with the club, but most recently you said it's part of a separate company and it was bought by money directly from Hong Kong. Was all the club not bought with money directly from Hong Kong?
First of all the properties are outside the football club. They're in different companies. None of the properties belong to the football club. The football club, the training ground was originally bought by Dave Whelan personally. I think, and don't hold me to it, he paid 1.8 million or thereabouts for it. When he did the deal with Choi, it was sold into one of the property companies and given a value of 650,000. That 650,000 to buy it in that property company came from Hong Kong. So the money did not come from the football club ever to buy that. And the fact that it's in the accounts at 650,000 could give us a tax problem that we're working on, because obviously we've got more than 650 when we sold it. We were talking to a number of bidders, as we have been from the middle of July onwards. And as the days went on, and we gave them options on the price, it appeared that a lot of them were looking at a training ground and the stadium only. They weren't interested in Sharpies necessarily. Some were, some weren't. But the ones who I thought were the football fans, as opposed to the property speculators, and more of them later, said, well, what's the alternative? And we'd say, well, if you want the package, it's X. If you don't take Sharpies, we give you a $500,000 discount on it. And if you don't take Euxton, we'll give you a £2 million discount on it. So you could knock 2 or 2.5 million off the price. And more were looking that way. And the end of July was coming, and no deal was in sight where we were going to sign it as hoped. And we needed backup money as well. So we took a decision, let's see, having turned down an offer for Euxton previously, and we got an offer, as you know now, from Preston, which we accepted. And that gave us the backup to continue going through September into October. Wigan in League One did not need, as a football club, 2 training grounds. That was the view we took. It'd been very nice to have it. And I know Mr. Ridsdale has said he's got a £10 million training ground. Well, if that's his value of it, why didn't he buy it when Whelan bought it 2 years ago? It's not worth 10 million. It's PR of that. So that is our reason and our strategy, because without cash, liquidation looms. We have to have cash reserves at all times. So that's the background.
In terms of Euxton, was when you initially had it as part of the package for the club, was it not a big selling point for potential buyers to have a Premier League standard facility to train at?
Now, I'll tell you what it was, and I'll tell you who was the worst offender at it, and that's Mr. Smurthwaite, and we'll talk about him later. When I went to see Smurthwaite, and the only reason I'm naming him is he signed an NDA and didn't bother returning it, so he didn't feel himself bound by it, so neither am I. I said, oh, just so you know, since the pack went out, we've sold Euxton training ground. And his face dropped. I needed that. I was going to make a profit on it. In other words, he had a back-to-back deal already. And this is what most of them wanted, back-to-back deals to get money back immediately.
Okay, that's a reasonable answer. Wigan MP Lisa Nandy said she was quite surprised and shocked and felt it was a bit of a mistake to sell a training ground. What do you think of that comment?
You want me to deal with Lisa Nandy now? Right. I met Lisa the first day I was there. She came to see me privately. We had a long chat about what administration was, because she didn't seem to be that wised up on it. Said, anytime we can help, get in touch. The next thing I know, we're going to the EFL, and she tells me she's writing a letter of, not complaint, but a letter to the EFL in support of our claim. I said, well, could you give me a copy of it so that I can put it to our council with a view to going forward? I had to chase her 3 times. We didn't get it till the week after the appeal. It didn't affect the appeal, but it just showed me that politicians speak but don't act. The next thing she criticised me for, or when I say me at any time, it's the 3 of us, is that at a press conference, we asked too many questions. We gave too much information and not enough. But the worst thing was, I think she gave an article on the 9th of September in which she was going on about our costs. I don't know if you can recall this article. And she specifically said that day, I have today written to the administrators asking them to justify their costs. Today is the 6th of October and I've received no letter. So if the fans want to email her and ask why she didn't write to me, because I've found out that political posturing doesn't save football clubs. She also attacked us, I think, over replying to the Americans after 10 minutes, turning their deal down.
Why was the deal turned down in 10 minutes?
It would have been quicker if I'd read the email. We had been talking to the Americans for about a month, finding every piece of information they wanted. It was obvious to me that they did not understand what an English administration was, because their opening gambit was, give us the club, we'll settle this debt, and in 2 years we'll pay your half-year costs. Well, that's not how you do an administration. That's how you might do a Chapter 11 in America. So we said, will you please instruct English lawyers to take advice? We then explained to them that the deal was 4 million so that we could pay the losses in the administration and the 1.3 million to creditors to save the penalty. We then get the weekend of the £2 million offer that took a week to come to us, during which we lost a bidder, but more than that later on. And that bid was 2 million. And we had to pay the 1.3 million and the 3.2 million loss in administration. And we couldn't accept that bid because in law, you cannot pay the unsecured creditors till you have paid the losses off in the administration. So before you could pay anything, we had to pay 3.2 million to the revenue for the VAT and pay-as-you-earn in administration. We explained it more than once. We went back to the Americans when we turned it down and said, if you want to offer 2.7 million and you pay the creditors or take the 15 points, we'll seriously consider it. Does that make it understandable to you?
Yeah, so in terms of the 2 million offer, it weren't legally acceptable on a point of view, legal standpoint.
Yes. And that's why it only took 10 minutes to turn it down and tell them where they could offer, none of which has been reported.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting look because in terms of if you can't legally accept an offer, that is obviously the most reasonable explanation why it's rejected.
Now, she know this. She's an MP. She makes the laws.
It's a very interesting standpoint, and to move away from Lisa Nandy back onto Euxton, the Wigan Post reported on the August 27th that Euxton was sold for around 1.6 million. Can you actually disclose how much it went for?
No, but
Is that a lot less than 1.6?
No, it's not less than 1.6.
So are you not allowed to disclose for the legal reasons, or is it in terms of?
I'm not going into individual figures in this. It doesn't make a scrap of difference what we sold it for. It will be published in our next report.
When shall we expect the report?
Pardon?
When should we
6 months after our appointment, so it'll be January.
Okay. And
what you have to understand is we have to report to creditors before I report to anybody else.
And that report can be viewed by anyone, or is it in terms or just creditors?
Well, somehow you can do a search at company's house because it's usually found there.
Okay, thanks for the information. And to now move on to the selling the club and that chapter of this 3-month period. I say like it's a book. It's obviously a timeline of events. And I think the first thing I'm going to say is, in an earlier press conference, you said that there was 4 main bidders, but in the most recent press conference on the August 27th, you said there was only 1 bidder. Can you clarify how many bidders there actually were?
Right. Let's go back to day 1. Stood up at a press conference and I said, I'll put my neck on the block. I expect 30 interested parties and 3 bidders. And that was based on my experience previously. By the end of this process, we had sent out 102 non-disclosure agreements. We ended up dealing with 22 bidders. Some were serious. One guy has come back 4 times with different backers. Some were not serious. Some were ridiculous. And what we did, and some were coming as late as the last week. So what we did is we'd have regular discussions, and we came to a conclusion at any one time we had 3, 4 or 5 what we would call serious bidders. Now you could phone me at 2 o'clock on a day and discuss it, and I'd say, yes, we've got 4 bidders. By that evening, I could have had 2 new bidders and 1 bidder drop out. I don't know if you remember me saying this job does not change by the day, it changes by the hour. And that is true. All the bidders at the end, none of them were there at the beginning. So if I had gone on regularly updates, number 1, I'd have been called a liar every 3rd day because it changed. And number 2, I think the mental health of the supporters would have drastically gone down even from where it was. They don't know how close at times this came to being a non-event. But then there was always another couple of people there that were pushing it on. And as a backdrop, we had the supporters who were trying to put together a bid. So that's the background to selling the club. It's the hardest job in football I've ever had. It was, although the figures aren't as big, it was much harder and much worse than Leeds United. And the actual bidders only came on the scene last 10 days. And as regards the bidders that walked away because of publicity, that is a true story. I went to see them on the Monday in London. I had a very good conversation with them. They were obviously money men as well as football fan. They instructed a lawyer. They got his client's account number. They were going to drop £4 million in on the Monday. And after that weekend of what they saw, they took a view. It was not for them. Well, whether you believe it or not.
We'll move back onto that specific case in a few moments. But can you confirm if the relegation to League One was the reason the first preferred bidder pulled out?
100%.
And that was a £10 million bidder at the start.
Oh, it was north of 10 million.
North of 10 million. How many actual bids have you had? And can you say the values of the previously rejected bids, obviously without naming any parties?
I've had 22 bids.
You've had 22 bids, but can you say the value of the bids?
Yes. They were from Smurf only made one bid. Although he says he's made two, he indicated he was going to make one. But then he wanted to buy the freehold of the stadium, and when the council knocked him back, he walked away. So he only made one bid. So the lowest bid, he says it's 3 million. Well, it isn't. It's 1.5 million and a promise is no good to me. And then we had bids. We had bids of over 5 million with conditions we couldn't live with. So they're not bids, in my opinion. First of all, you can't tell the administrators what they can do. It's against football regulations. And what they wanted us to do, and this is more than one bidder, is to not sell any players. So we're left with this wage bill every month that we couldn't meet, which is not a possibility. Our job is to save the club, not just listen to one bidder. We had bidders who would make a bid of 5 million. One of them came to the club, saw Wigan win, very impressed, and then dropped the bid to 3 million. I mean, this is the sort of people we were dealing with, mainly speculators, money men who were looking to make a turn, not long-term investors.
Thank you. And over the last few months, the most high-profile tries for the club, obviously according to the various news outlets, Alan Nixon, were the French Americans and Smurfway, as we previously mentioned. Can you explain the interest of the French American party led by Godfrey Garnier and give an estimated timeline of events of the dealings you've had?
They were there for quite a while from when they first came on the scene. Garnier came over. He obviously knew his football, which was a big plus. But we had to persuade them, you're not buying it under American regulations. You've got to buy it under English law. They left it very late in the day to even take advice off a UK lawyer. And we could never get the price in. We dropped our price and they didn't really drop their clauses, which they insisted had to stay. And that's why the deal never got done. I think they got together with Lenigan at one stage to see if a joint deal could be done because he didn't want the football. But a deal couldn't be done. There was a lot of rumour about somebody wanting to move the club away from Wigan. We know one of the bidders was looking to do that because he told us. But we think there's another bidder, and I'm not saying it is the Americans, but the fact they didn't want to sign a lease but wanted a license wasn't very reassuring. I'm not sure I'd have been popular selling the club and seeing it move out of town.
There was a lot of adversity when it was mentioned in an article by Alan Nixon that Wigan could potentially be moved to Leigh Sports Village. And speaking about Alan Nixon, he said in a podcast with myself that the French American party believed that they had an agreement on the provision that no more players were sold before Kit Pray and Jamal Lowe left. Is this correct?
No. We would not let any bidder bind us to what we could do to run the club. We had to operate the cash flow. If the money wasn't there for wages, we weren't going to put the money in personally. Was
this something the French American asked?
There was an understanding that if they came over and signed a contract that day, that we might listen to them. But that's not how they were operating. First of all, time differences made it difficult, but we spoke to them every day and they wanted to go at their pace and have the conditions, and we wouldn't accept that at any time.
Are you able to briefly mention any of the conditions?
I've already mentioned them.
No problem. And I think
embargo on player sales not allowed.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, Jamal Lowe and Cedric Keeper were mentioned, and you said
the first offer was any an embargo on all sales. No more sales. After the first 4, I think.
No problem. And you said in Barry Worthington's Q&A last Tuesday that Alan Nixon had given a good account of events, but he's missing information that changes the context from the podcast I recorded with him. Can you explain what these missing pieces of information were so fans can understand it?
I know I myself am not heads, but he's got a job to do just like me and the freedom of the press. But when he says we're turning down a 2 million offer, that wasn't the whole story. The 2 million offer came with strings that were illegal. The Americans never told him, so he didn't know to publish it.
That's understandable. And why do you believe the French Americans briefed Nixon so heavily?
Well, it worked 2 ways. He got a story, and they could use social media against us to force us into a corner.
You mentioned social media, and you mentioned in a club statement, which implied that Alan Nixon's article, I believe on the 13th of September, scared off a bidder, which you previously mentioned, which kind of detailed the French Americans' plans to make a £2 million bid. Can you say why exactly did they scare a bidder off?
2 things. Number 1, when I'd gone to see them in London, they made it very plain that if there was any adverse publicity or any publicity before they had the club, they would withdraw. And secondly, when that article came out, all the bidders I was dealing with were emailing me, phoning me, what the hell's going on? You're selling the club for 2 million and you're asking us for this. It didn't make our job any easier. The Bahrainis, the people who had seen then said they were pulling out.
Can you reveal any more details on the party that walked away because of the adverse media? As far as I can say, there was no story circulated about 4 million being agreed with any party.
No, there wasn't, because it was all done on the Friday, and I act on certainty. I said at all my press conferences, I'm not going to every day put the latest position up because it changes. When I've got something certain to say, I will come and say it.
That's understandable. And obviously the adverse media did scare off the buyers in this instance. But do you believe that, I know you got a lot of criticism for that comment, and for me, I'd like to quiz you on that, of why they were scared by the adverse media from social media, because surely if they were serious buyers for a football club, they wouldn't be scared by adverse media and obviously reaction on social media.
I think this was their first venture into football, and that they don't understand the glare publicity, shall we say, and it was not welcome. And it was only a small part of their setup, so it wasn't necessary. It was going to be something they wanted to enjoy.
Can you understand the criticisms on that point of view?
I can understand all fans' criticism, because frankly, they have not understood the process. They've not understood a lot of things, and anything on social media ultimately becomes true. The minute it goes on social media, everybody believes it, jumps on it, WhatsApps me, emails me, whether it's true or not. So yes, I would believe there are an element of all fans that do their club no good. They think they're fans, they're not really. Leeds have got them, Wigan have got them, but the vast majority of Wigan fans behaved remarkably well and were supportive and understood our position. There's an element of abuse that goes with the job. With
the abuse you received, in terms of the supporters, you've kind of had a lot of criticisms on obviously the sale of Euxton, the player sales, as we've previously mentioned. What did you think of the protest by the Wigan Athletic Grievance Society outside Begbies Traynor? That's just one of many examples. I know fans have voiced their opinions on social media through that WhatsApp about yourself and the other administrators. So what is your stance on that?
A number of fans turned up to make a protest. It's within their legal right. As long as, I don't know, were they social distancing? Can't remember. It was this wasn't the mainstream of Wigan fans. How many were there? 30?
I believe so.
Fine. This is what this country is about. You can protest.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like you say, the freedom of speech. You're allowed to voice criticisms.
I think there's ways of protesting, and some of the language used and threats made shows a lack of thought, shall we say, if I'm going to be kind. I must tell you, though, after we got the sale announced, I didn't get any more abuse that night. I went back on about 20 people who had been really OTT and text them, can I have an apology and a £20 fine to the supporters club? And they've all come back and they're going to send £20 to the supporters club. So we raised £400 that night.
That's a positive, that you've managed to find a way to benefit the supporters club from an initially negative activity. To move back onto the sale and interest in the club,
yeah.
As Norman Smurthwaite broke his NDA by speaking to the Wigan Evening Post as well on the 25th of September. Can you explain what exactly were Norman Smurthwaite's interest in buying the club?
Make money as quickly as possible.
He
is buyer of last resort, as we know in our business. He will pay £4.99 for a £10 note. He won't even give you 50p in the pound.
Do you believe he could have gone on and sold potential assets?
Well, I know he would have. He wasn't bothered about the 15-point penalty when I saw him.
And did these discussions, obviously you mentioned that he made a bid. What was the bid, if you can disclose that?
What bid?
The bid Norman Smurthwaite made, because you said he made one bid.
1.5 million and a promise.
And the promise, was a promise a financial promise or more conditions?
No, it was financial promise for future money, but not acceptable to me, promises.
Yeah, thanks for the answer. And to speak further, at the August 27th press conference at the DW Stadium, you mentioned that Ian Lenigan had Ian Lenigan placed a bid for the club? Because I remember in the early parts of the process, he did a massive campaign where he said he'd like to unite the town under one sporting banner. Was there any discussions with him?
Yes, there were discussions. He wasn't bidding for the club.
But was he bidding for the DW Stadium?
He was bidding for the properties, yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the answer. Without going into details now, we'll move on to the potential Spanish owners. Without going into details that break the non-disclosure agreements you have in place, can you explain the timeline of when the new owners came onto the scene and how quickly it developed?
I think it was about a week before. I wasn't dealing with the new owners that actually contacted, I think, either Paul or Dean. They came to the stadium on the Thursday, liked what they saw, hammered out an offer with us that was totally acceptable, and agreed to send us over a substantial deposit the next morning. Once we got that deposit, we put on the website what we put on.
And that was obviously really good news for the town. Earlier today, the business desk published an article that the Spanish businessman who's on the verge of taking over Wigan Athletic is Jose Miguel Querido Cristo. Can you comment on this?
I've had national papers and everybody on. I will tell you what I've told them. If you read our last release, they have asked for anonymity, whoever the bidder is, until the Football League decide. We will honour that anonymity and we will not discuss this.
That's more than acceptable and understandable. With the Spanish owners, are you able to disclose what exactly they bought?
They bought everything but Sharpies.
Everything but Sharpies. And are you allowed to disclose how much the sale was worth?
I'm not going to disclose anything about the bid.
At this point, could it potentially come out once the
It'll
owners?
come out eventually when we've got the money.
Yeah, when they're revealed as the new owners and the EFL checks have been done.
When we do our first report.
All right, no worries. Is that the same report you referred to earlier on Companies House?
In January, yeah.
Thank you, Gerald. And to now move on to another topic which yourself and Begbies Traynor have received criticism of is the press strategy you've had. Because I know one of the fans' criticisms of the administrators were the several contradictions and mixed messages that have been received throughout the process. So I just want to get your opinion on this and just ask what was your press strategy when dealing with the media?
Right. The press were used for two purposes. Number one, to get out there the club was for sale, what was for sale, what was needed, and how to go about the sale. That worked. As regards communicating with the fans, the press were partially useful, but we took a view we were only going to go public on certainty. Nothing else matters. You know, people could offer 20 million, but if they can't find it, what's the point of telling a fan the next day it's fallen through? How does that make the process look? If they had seen the speed at which people came in and out, the criticism, which was not deserved, would have been 10 times worse. So what we did for the second or third press conference, I invited the supporters club, if you remember, to bring 10 people to the press conference, not show me the questions, and we then had an hour question and answer session at which the media were present but couldn't intervene. As a result of that, we answered every question. I then said, can one of you be a focal point for all the questions to save us time? And Barry, very kindly, and I'd like to thank him publicly, took that on. I think he's been criticised now. It's in the nature of football fans to criticise when things aren't good. And every Tuesday night at 5 o'clock, I don't think we're having one tonight, but I'll phone him, see if he's got one after this. We would have an hour question and answer session and answer everything. And when fans nattered me and I'd had enough, I'd text them, put your question to Barry Worthington. But they didn't. They all thought they should have a direct dialogue with me. Well, that's not possible. It's just not possible when you're doing the job you have to do.
Was it a bit of a regret that you had in terms of when you gave out your number at the start? Is that kind of the risk you take, that fans have your number and can text you certain things?
Probably 10,000 people have my mobile number. Every football job gets my number. It's a risk I take because I have to be able to collate and understand what's going on by the hour. So people phone me, email me, text me. It's very useful. And I can, at the end of the day, sit down, look through it and understand what's moved. So no, I don't regret giving it out at all.
Thank you. And another point of criticism which was drawn a lot on throughout the process was after on the 27th of August, you did an interview with Channel 4, which was after the press conference, and a reporter quizzed you on the following comment that you said in the Supporters Club Q&A. It will be better that it is a UK owner, as Wigan have no doubt suffered by having foreign ownership. And obviously, your response to that, I know you didn't like the question in it from the reporter. How do you reflect back on this?
Let's get it right. They cut that a bit. They did ask me that question and I explained. And then she used what I said, but different words. So you mean X, Y, Z? And I said, please do not put words in my mouth. Did that come over in the interview, me saying that?
Yeah, it came out that you, when you was asked a question about the...
put words in my mouth, I'm going to stop this interview.
Yeah, that was the exact quote which was said.
Did I get the line before that or not? No, they cut it. So she's tried again to use different words to what I said. I said, if you're going to behave like that, I'm stopping the interview. And I walked off. On the way, she tried to back off a bit. And I said, right, let's go back. We finished the interview. And then as I walked away off camera, I said to her, nothing personal. And she said, thank you. So that's the whole story. But like all media, you cut and paste to get the story. And it was a good story. I walked off camera.
Yeah, I think it was important to ask you about this because you have received a lot of criticism for your reaction.
Why did I say what I said? I explained a number of times to the fans and others that Wigan were the victim of foreign ownership. And as a result of that, when you've got to cut back, the thing you cut back on is the thing that's furthest away from you geographically, which is why you're in administration.
That's understandable.
I said, therefore, and in fact, Lisa, when she came to see me, wanted me to have Wigan fans, Wigan business people buy it locally. I said, therefore, it would be better, it'd be preferable to have a local owner. I didn't rule out a foreign owner. It's like saying, do I prefer chicken or steak? I prefer chicken, but it doesn't mean I won't eat steak.
Okay, that's an interesting point of view. And to reflect on the media strategy as a whole, would you do anything differently?
I'd have liked us to beat Fulham. It would have made life easier. But no, as regards to strategy, it's been used before. It's worked before. It worked here. But 5-10 years ago, when I was doing football clubs, there was no social media. Now we've got this new social media, which we have to understand. And I'm a bit long in the tooth. I understand it. But it's not part of an administrator's duties to deal with social media. I've done my best. There must be at least 30 supporters who I have regular WhatsApps with, even now, to answer the more middle of the road ones. But that complicates it because rumours, fake news goes faster than true news.
That's correct. And to move on now to stay on supporters. As a football supporter yourself, you're a Leeds United fan. You've said it a few times. I know you've been the chairman of Leeds United. I believe was it 2004, 2005?
Correct.
And can you understand the fans' frustrations given the assets that have been sold since the start of the process?
Yes, of course I understand it, but they have to understand, do you want to... All I promised to do was to get to the end of the season and sell the club. I didn't say there'd be no surgery. I didn't say you get the club that you had yesterday. That's impossible. The money that was being lost by Wigan was ridiculous. It's the problem with football. It's why the football clubs, especially in the Championship, are in such trouble. Because they're all going to buy the dream. And Leeds was the first team to try and buy the dream. And I know what happened there. You have to accept you've got a football club. If it's saved, you'll be seeing football at the DW Stadium next season. On day one, if I said it's either that or liquidation, I know what the answer would have been.
I think that's a fair comment because every football fan would like to return to the DW Stadium. To stick on the subject of criticisms, I will move on quickly. On the 23rd of August, an anonymous statement was circulated on social media. This consequently led you to saying that you are taking legal action over a serious allegation leveled against yourself and your fellow administrators from an unnamed party. Can you provide any update on this?
No. Well, can you just give me the context again?
So, if we...
Anonymous on social media.
Yeah.
What was it saying?
It was the theme of the anonymous letter was that Wigan Athletic are on the brink of being destroyed and assets stripped, if you can recall that statement.
Oh, a lot of people have said that. We've taken advice. We've got more important things to do at the moment. We may go back to it. We'll see.
Do you believe there was a bit of a motivation behind it? Because I know you mentioned at the time you felt there's a bit of an agenda.
I think that came from one of the bidders. One of the failed bidders was trying to stir things up.
Okay, that's an interesting outlook.
I have no evidence. I have no evidence for it, and I won't go and take action until I get evidence. But there are people more adept than me at using social media for their own ends, and it has been used in the case of Wigan by more than one party.
Okay, thanks for the answer. To move on now to the subject of the EFL, in the club statement last Wednesday on the 30th.
Go back to the supporters for a minute.
Yeah, if you want to add something to that, because I know we've covered a lot of criticisms.
Yeah. Two things. Number one, you'll recall on day one, the supporters raised about 180,000 to let us get to the end of the season. I'm hopeful that we will repay that money to the supporters club when this deal goes through. To the best of our ability, we will do that. The second thing is the 800,000 that they've raised. I don't know what they're going to do. I think they may be sending it back, but I would hope that some of the fans will let it be used for the new people to support the club going forward. And I'd like to pay tribute to Wigan supporters generally, 90% of whom have been magnificent in their fundraising money and support, and even in the comments to me. Some of the comments have been very funny. I'd like to name one supporter, Anthony Hopkins, known as Hannibal, who was supporting me from day one with one waiver when he thought I'd lost the plot. And I said I would name him if I went on. He has lost two of his friends because of it. I'd like to thank him. And I just am amazed at the level of enthusiasm from the Wigan supporters, which I didn't realise before I was appointed. And I think that needs to go on the record.
Yeah, I think although you've received all sorts throughout these last few months, the one thing you can't deny is the passion that the fans have for the football club. And it's come through that to raise £800,000 in the midst of a pandemic where money is already quite tight. It's a working class town. I think it deserves to be applauded. And it's nice that you come on record to say that about the supporters.
I'd like to also know which of the supporters signed me up for the old age people's home and also put me in touch with the debt advisory firm to see if they could help me with my problems. I found that very amusing. If they'd like to text me, I'll buy them a drink, because that was funny.
Yeah, it's nice to see that you're able to see the funny side of some of the things that's happened in terms of the criticisms. To move on now to more serious subjects, and a big talking point, the English Football League. In the club statement on Wednesday, 30th September, last Wednesday, it said that the paperwork was being prepared to be submitted. Has this now been submitted?
Not yet. So there's a lot of paperwork to go in. It'll go in this week, and I'm asked when will we get a decision, and the best I can say is I believe it will be October.
Do you believe it could be possibly completed before the end of the transfer window on the 16th of October?
No.
Do you think it'll be a matter of weeks rather than months?
Yes.
What is required of the bidders by the EFL in order to successfully pass their owners and directors test?
Well, number one, you need the name of everybody involved from a director's point of view. You need to know where the money's coming from to buy the club. You need to know who's providing third-party money, if anybody. There's a lot of form filling, and you need to show a cash flow for the first 2 years and your method of funding it. And that, when we were selling it up to recently, showed a loss circa 2.5 million a year. Even after all the cuts we've done, it still is losing £2.5 million a year. Now, there is room for more cuts, not a lot. You might chop another 200,000 or 300,000 off, and that's before any player sales. So that was about a 5 million requirement. However, the government announced no fans till at the earliest March. So that adds another 800,000 to £1 million of costs.
Yeah, it's a massive difference not being able to have supporters in the grounds, because it is, especially in the lower leagues, it's the biggest form of income, supporters, without a doubt. And with the coronavirus pandemic, there is talk of Premier League assistance for League One and League Two clubs.
Yes, did you see the figure yesterday? 50 million for the whole of the EFL.
And yeah, I saw that figure. Would Wigan be able to benefit from that if it is distributed before the new owners formally take over?
Yes. Well, what will happen is we will make our claim in accordance with the regulations, but it will be paid to the new owners. It won't be paid to us unless we end up running it for the next 3 months.
And that is extremely unlikely.
Yeah, I don't see that.
The EFL also made a payment to clubs at the end of last season to support them through the current crisis of the coronavirus pandemic. And I believe it was reported that Wigan couldn't benefit from this because it was in administration. Is this correct? And might that money be forthcoming once the club's bought?
Now, from memory, it was 2.7 million that was due in July, which was not paid to us because of the football creditors. Because we were relegated, that 2.7 million drops down to, can't remember whether it's 300 or 600,000. That's not been paid to us, but will be paid to the new owners. That's my understanding.
Thank you. And to stay on the subject of creditors, can we just run through the owed creditors? So excluding the 4 million non-football creditors, what is the total value of creditors now? And what is the makeup of these creditors?
Well, there's two lots of creditors. There's the Yeung companies, which are 25 million, which won't be claiming and will be written off. And then there's 5.2 million of other creditors, of which the government are 3 million plus. I'm not going into the other individual creditors today. They'll be his house.
Okay, that'll be in the report in January, as we've mentioned earlier in the podcast. How much is due to HMRC? And are all these now new creditors that have come about, like...
No. I think it's 3.2 million is owed to HMRC in respect of the debt at the 1st of July.
Okay.
Since then, we've incurred VAT and tax liabilities, 3.5 million-ish, which we have to pay before anybody.
How much money is currently in the bank, and what will be done with it if it's still there when the takeover is completed? Would it go to the new owners?
No, it'll be used to pay the VAT and the tax.
Yeah, that was a bit of a daft one, but how much money is currently in the bank?
I'm not commenting on it. It varies day to day.
All right, no worries. Is that just something you don't want to talk about, or is it because of a legal reason?
I don't talk about it.
All right, we'll move on now.
When we get to January, you will see a full receipts and payments account, what we've had in and what we've paid. It's not for discussing today because it could be different tomorrow.
Okay, that's more understandable. What are you allowed to disclose? What are the monthly running costs of the clubs now in terms of player wages, other wages, and other operating costs?
I think the total costs are 600,000, of which the wages about 217.
Thank you for the answer. And when the new owners purchase the club, can you explain where exactly that money goes?
What money goes?
When the owners buy the club, where does the money they pay go?
We have to agree an apportionment of the price, so that's not been done yet.
Okay, thank you. And to now look towards the future, we know the NDAs are in place with the Spanish bidders, but can you provide any further colour on the preferred bidders?
No, I think all that's going to happen, the future is as follows. Best course of action, the EFL, as soon as practically possible, pass the buyer for the fit and proper person test. The agreement is then signed and sealed off as completed. We receive the money. They get the football share, the FA share, and they are responsible from the 1st of October for all ongoing costs. We are still administrators of the 5 companies, and we will be, in my opinion, for at least another year.
So in terms of that, even when a take was complete, what is your role as the administrator? Because you mentioned that you could be here for another year.
We have to account for the tax liabilities. We have to possibly liaise with the insolvency service. But most importantly of all, as I explained when we talked about the add-ons, we are entitled to the £250,000 over the first 12 months. So we have to stay in office to get that money.
Thank you. With the Spanish bidders, are you confident that they have the means to run the club for the long term?
What do you call the long term?
As in like the next long term, I'd say between 5 and 10 years. Short term, I don't know if you agree.
Not part of our job to even consider that.
With the supporters club, we've previously mentioned earlier, do you believe the Spanish bidders could be keen to work with the supporters club and obviously have that support involvement in the club going forwards?
We have said it's not for us to get involved in that discussion. It's between the new owners and the supporters club.
No problem. And if a deal does fall through for whatever reason, is there still interested parties in the background prepared to step in?
We have written to all the other bidders. At least 2 or 3 have said, come back to us if nothing happens.
Okay, that's good news. And will there be any updates from the administrators as the takeover progresses, or will we only get news when it's complete?
You will get the good or bad news when it completes.
Is there a timescale on when you think the deal's
Be done in October.
will be done this month, you believe?
I am confident that the EFL will come back to us before the end of October.
Yeah, and that'd be great news for the football club. To also add to the podcast, it's a widely discussed topic with administration, is the administrator's fees. Can you disclose how much these fees are?
I can't give you a figure today, but what I can tell you is the following. The Wigan Athletic Football Club will not be paying any of the administrator's fees. The only legal fees they will pay are to do with the appeal. And they will be charged as legal fees and will show up in the receipts and payments account. We had an agreement with Mr. Yeung when we took on the job and when we did the deal about writing off, that he, through his property companies, are responsible for our fees and our legal fees, and they will be charged there accordingly. And just so full transparency, we also did it on the basis of a success fee only if we sold the club. So if we didn't sell the club, no success fee. If we liquidated the club, the agreement with Mr. Yeung could mean that he did get money back. So we've done everything in our power to avoid liquidating the club.
Can you confirm that the sale of Euxton is, I know it was reported that this is the way the admin fees will be covered. Is this true?
Well, first of all, they'll have to pay possible tax on that sale. Secondly, there may be creditors in the company that owns Euxton that have to be paid. And thirdly, it will go towards paying the costs of all the liquidation.
Thank you. And in terms of the admin fees as well, I know it's widely talked about that the fees with administration, when you look at previous clubs, they are quite high. What do you believe are the criticisms of high administration fees?
Which club are you looking at? Because Bolton's fees were over £1 million.
Yeah, do you think that is quite a large sum of money though for 3 months' work, £1 million?
3 months' work for 7 days a week, some days 16 or 17 hours a day, for 3 partners and 5 staff. I think the fees are what they are. I'm not ashamed of what we earn. We put the effort in and we're paid by results. We came into this job with no guarantees on fees, and it could be that we got paid nothing if it all went wrong. So yes, I think the fees that we'll ultimately charge have been agreed by the creditors, they've been agreed by the person who's bearing them, and that to me is enough justification, as long as the Wigan fans aren't paying for it, and they're not.
To sum things up now, of the 3 months you came into the club on the 1st of July, we're now not midway through, we're at the start of October. How would you reflect on the last 3 months on a whole?
Very difficult. It's been a good job we've kept some of what's gone on away from the public eye, for the mental health of Wigan supporters. We've been criticised for how long it's taken us to sell this club. I've looked at some other administrations. Bolton was 2.5 months. Coventry was 3 months. Bournemouth and Port Vale were over a year, and it took us 3 months. So I think that criticism is very ill-founded, especially by the politicians who have made it.
I think that's an interesting point that you made. And to reflect onto the administration too, is there anything you would do differently in terms of, I know you mentioned earlier, you'd like Wigan to beat Fulham, it would make the job 10 times easier. But is there anything now in hindsight which you would have done differently at that time?
No, I think the strategy we've followed has been about 95% the way we had to go. Hindsight obviously might change the odd thing, the odd word we've used. It's been a bit like Groundhog Day. I don't know if you've ever seen that film, where every day is the same. And for the last 6 weeks, it's been Groundhog Day at Wigan. But I think we've come over the hill. We're on the home stretch, and I'm confident what I said on day one will come about. And if for any reason it doesn't, I am big enough to come down to Wigan and explain to everybody what's happened.
That's good to hear. And in terms of the administration, it's interesting you stand by every decision you've made. And I imagine now the process is almost it's a bit of a waiting game now. And can we just, is there anything now you'd like to add to end this podcast? I'd like to say thank you for coming on and providing a bit of insight and explanation into certain decisions you've made, certain criticisms you've received, and obviously a bit of an inside story as well in terms of some bidders who've been mentioned in this podcast.
I think two points to finish on. It's been a pleasure to come on, by the way. On a general point, I may very well write to the EFL to ask them to review generally the insolvency policy and the implementation. They are between the rock and the hard place. They can only implement the rules that the clubs have agreed. And if it wasn't Wigan, it'd be another club, and Wigan wouldn't like to see them get beneficial. But in the current pandemic, we've got to relook at these rules because they're not for the benefit of football. So I think that's the overriding lesson that's come out to me at Wigan. And I'm looking forward to having a weekend off.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think in terms of the coronavirus pandemic now, using your experience in insolvency practitioning, and obviously football with your chairman stint at Leeds United, do you think the coronavirus pandemic will see more clubs going into administration?
Without any doubt. I said earlier this year, in fact, I think I did my own podcast on it, I expected 6 clubs by Christmas. Well, one's gone, 5 to go. Somebody else reckoned 10 plus. There are clubs teetering on the brink.
And this is a sad reality. And what do you think can be done to protect these clubs?
Well, nothing, because if you change the rules for them, why don't Wigan benefit from it? So they're not going to change the rules.
That's a fair comment. And we just need a safe return of fans now to ensure that the income that clubs have been missing. I know you mentioned it because obviously fans won't return now to the earliest of March. It's a real crucial time over the next few months for football clubs, especially at the lower end of the spectrum. I know Premier League clubs could survive because it's the top of football in this country.
Well, keep faith with your club, because that's the mainstay of Wigan as a town. It's the centre of the town for the fans, isn't it? It's what they live for. So everybody in life goes through bad times and good. You've gone through a horrendous 3 months with us. I accept that. You had a good result on the weekend. You've got 6 points. The good days, hopefully, will come back in the not too distant future. And be assured that after Leeds and Bournemouth and Port Vale, Wigan will be the next result I look for on the weekend.
That's really nice to hear. And in terms of, I can't agree more in hoping for better days. We've had a couple of positive results. We're filming this on Tuesday night. We played Port Vale this evening. Before that, we beat Liverpool 6-1 in the EFL Trophy. Away win at Fratton Park, which was their first home defeat in 18 months.
You didn't do it with Aston Villa, though, did you?
No.
11.
But I'd just like to say thank you for your time tonight, and thanks for answering the questions. I do appreciate you reaching out and giving your version of events, because on this podcast, I like to give a bit of a fair report to get all angles of the administration covered. I've spoke to Paul Stanley at length, and it's nice to hear your versions of events. I know people may not agree with these versions, but obviously you've said your part now, so it's up to the fans to make up their own minds of what you've said. If you've enjoyed the Full-Time Whittle podcast with Gerald Krasner, please feel free to like, share and subscribe to this channel.